Hey friends, it's Sarah, and tomorrow is Valentine's Day. And in honor of that, I wanted to talk about some romance books that I have read recently. So, just to be upfront, not all of these were hits for me, so we're going to talk about them in order of my personal enjoyment from least to most, so they get better as the video goes on. But first up, we have The Truth According to Ember by Danica Nava. So this follows Ember, who is Indigenous, and she lies on her resume about being white and then also beefs up her resume in order to get job interviews. She ends up landing her dream job and starts seeing her fellow Native coworker despite the company's no dating policy. But the longer that she's at this company, the more lies she has to tell and the harder it gets for her to be her true self. So when I had first heard about this book, I just heard about the part where she lies about her ethnicity in order to combat racism and have better luck getting job interviews. What I didn't realize when I was picking it up is that she also lies about her qualifications in like some pretty serious ways. Despite only having taken one intro to accounting class, she says she has like a whole accounting degree, and she needs a good job to finish her education, but I had a really hard time equating the knowledge you would get from like one accounting class with having a whole degree. They do kind of address this later. She gets like a promotion to be a personal assistant, which I can believe you can like bullshit your way through a lot easier than a literal accounting job. But I was like, you're a little too confident about your abilities having passed one accounting class to think you can just like lie about accounting knowledge. It was just kind of weird. And then after she gets like that job and everything, she lies to the love interest, Danica, even though he knows at least some of the truth about her, like he knows she's Native, but she lies about everything else. And he like sees through a lot of those lies, but she just doesn't stop lying ever. And I could not handle her lying about everything. It would have been one thing if it was just to her coworkers in order to keep her job, but like lying to Danica all the time was like insane. I just was like, how are you supposed to have a real relationship if you're lying to him the whole time? And because of this, I thought that the reconciliation at the end of the book was really hurried and that he forgave her way too easily. It just wasn't realistic to me. Ember also gets herself into a lot of really awkward and cringy situations with her lying, so that was really tough to read about. If you don't like cringe comedy, this book is not for you. I'm not a huge fan of cringe comedy, and it was really painful. And again, she only stopped lying at the very end of this book, and if I were Danica, I would just run, because that is a whole lot of red flags. Where's the red flag guy? He needs his giant red flag to be like, get away from her. This is not good. So like mildly spoilery part here, but at one point they're back at Danica's place and he has a cat, and Ember had previously lied about loving cats even though she's like pretty allergic to them. And so she gets to his house, she starts sneezing and sniffling. He's like, oh no, are you allergic? And she lies again and says, no, not at all. Like, that would have been a great place to say, yeah, sorry, I really wanted you to like me, so I said I like cats, but actually I'm allergic to them. Or even like a half lie being like, I love cats, but I'm allergic, so I can't have them. But instead she just like denies it and then wakes up the next morning with like a giant puffed up face. And I'm like, girl, like this is such a small thing that I feel like she could have come clean about, and that would have, even like that little thing would have made the relationship have a bit more integrity to me. But alas, she just has to lie about literally everything in her life. Things I did like about this book, I like the representation of Native Americans in a rom-com, and I also thought this book was at its strongest when the characters were discussing the difficulties they faced as a result of racism and prejudice. I also loved Danica's sister. She had Down syndrome and she was like a really cool character, and I loved their relationship, how much like he loved her, and their siblinghood was so sweet. And I would definitely check out other books by this author, because I didn't mind the writing. It was just like the plot of this one that wasn't for me. I definitely want to give her a second chance, because I think it was just like, this one's not for me, but I could see other people enjoying it. Up next is Puck and Prejudice by Leah Riley. This is somewhere between 2.5 and 3 stars for me. I keep waffling back and forth, I'm not sure. But it is a deeply unserious book about Tuck, who is an NHL goalie on sick leave, and he accidentally time travels to Regency, England, where he meets Lizzie, who wants nothing more than to be a rich widow so she can have her freedom. They decide to enter into a marriage of convenience as they look for ways to send Tuck back into his own time, but then of course they start to fall in love because it's a romance. And this was like kind of fun. It was very silly, but it didn't shy away from that. So it wasn't a horrible reading experience. And I think I would have like actually liked and enjoyed this book if it wasn't a romance. Like I kind of just want like a buddy comedy about these two people trying to like pass the man off as her husband and then sending him back to the future. That would have been really fun. I would have really enjoyed that. But instead we have to have romance in it, and that kind of ruined it for me, unfortunately. I hated that in this his pet name for her was Pocket Rocket. I don't think it was really ever explained why he started calling her that. Maybe I missed it. If you've read this book and you remember the explanation for why he calls her Pocket Rocket, like let me know. But I think he just starts saying that. And thankfully it's not super often, but it just made me like cringe out of my skin every time he said it. So I did enjoy Lizzie as a character. She was kind of fun, but I couldn't see why exactly she liked Tuck, other than the fact that he was like a modern man with modern ideas about relationships and women's right. Like, she didn't like his personality, she just liked that he wasn't like, you are stuck in that house and you can't vote and everything. There's also no real reason for him to be a hockey player, and it only comes up when he's making like hockey analogies in his head or being like, as a goalie, I'm good at observing and being calm under pressure. But like, why was he a goalie? He's not in the gear on the cover, so that's like a nitpick, but he's also like not weird enough to be a goalie. There's kind of like this lore in hockey, maybe in other sports too, I'm not sure, but that like goalies are like super strange, and he's like a pretty normal dude, so I feel like he should have just been like a normal hockey player. Other weird things in this book, Jane Austen has a cameo in this as Lizzie's best friend. I thought this was going to be like really annoying and really get on my nerves, but I didn't mind it that much. She just kind of like shows up here and there, and it's not that bad, but it is pretty silly. This was also like surprisingly actually quite smutty. It was about 3.5 out of 5 on the spice level. And the time travel issue was resolved like super quickly on every front. Lizzie comes to terms with him being from the future really easily. Tuck passes relatively unnoticed in the Regency era, and then they just figure out how to send him back in time with basically no effort on their part. It's kind of like a Deus Ex Machina, but it's fine, whatever. A specific thing, not quite spoilery, but like at one point Tuck tries to convince Lizzie to come to the future with him by listing things that are like better in the future, and there's like a few things, and the one thing that actually works is he's like, there's tampons, and explains what tampons are, and she's like, sign me up for the future, that sounds incredible. Which is just so goofy to me. Like, I could see it being appealing if you only have like rags to deal with your period, but like to have him be like, there's like cars and stuff, and she's like, eh, and he's like, and tampons, and she's like, oh, yes please. That was so goofy. Like, be for real. Also, Tuck accidentally named Pride and Prejudice. Like, he doesn't even know that's the name, but he kind of like comes up with it, and that just felt like actively hostile, that a man who knows nothing about like Regency England or anything is just like, I don't know, call it Pride and Prejudice. It felt like really mean to Jane Austen, to be honest. And actual spoilers for the end of the book now, so like click to the next book if you don't want to hear this. But it is absolutely absurd that their happy ending is that they do long distance and Lizzie just has to like time travel several times a year because Tuck is dead in her time and she's like a widow in her time. So she just has to do all the work, and so she's just constantly like back and forth between 1812 and the present, and I'm like, Tuck, what are you doing in this? And then also having to fly from England to like America. It's wild, it absolutely makes no sense, and I think they should have just not had a happy ending. But overall, I think this was a quick enough read that kind of the flaws just like passed me by. I think I might actually make like a whole video about this book, because the longer I think about it, the more ridiculous it actually was. But like when I was reading it, I was like, haha, silly, whatever, keep going. And it didn't like actively bother me, but it is just so unserious that I think I might make a whole video just talking about it. So, no promises, but keep an eye out. That might be coming in the future. Next up, we have a book that I was sad that I didn't enjoy more because it was a gift from a friend, so I'm sorry, Emma. I wanted to like this one a lot, and it just ended up being medium, and that is Lavash at First Sight by Taleen Voskuni. This one was 3 stars, so it wasn't bad. It just didn't like, it didn't blow my mind. It was okay. It was fine. So this is about Nazali, who takes a vacation from her high-pressure tech job to help her parents run their booth at a food packaging conference, and while she's there, she runs into this charming woman named Vanya, and they hit it off. They discovered that not only are they both Armenian, but their parents actually know each other, Unfortunately, the way that they know each other is that their family's businesses are competitors, and so their parents are like, you cannot hang out with her, you can have nothing to do with that family. And so throughout this weekend, Nazli and Vanya must compete in cooking competitions while hiding their budding romance from their parents. Seems like a pretty fun, like, forbidden romance plot, right? Similar to Puck and Prejudice, I just didn't think this should have been a romance. I really liked the family drama, the competition aspect of it was really good, the food sounded delicious, but the romance just felt kind of tacked on and didn't really add anything to the story, and I just didn't feel the characters' chemistry, sadly. This was a closed-door romance that felt kind of refreshing, but I didn't feel that they were actually in love with each other. Even though it's like a weekend, I don't know, the chemistry wasn't chemistrying for me, unfortunately. Which is too bad, because I'm always looking for more sapphic romances, and this one I just was like, you guys should have just been actual gal pals. But the things that this book did well, I thought the discussions around the insane pressures of the corporate world, the tension between tradition and modernity, and then the contrast of like authenticity and popularity were the most interesting parts of the story. Nazli was a little bit of a pushover when it came to her job at the beginning, and so it was really satisfying to see her kind of grow as a character and stand up for herself by the end of the book. The main conflict between the two families hinged on the fact that Vanya's family was selling like kind of whitewashed Armenian food that was sold as health food to try and appeal to white people, whereas Nazli's family sold traditional, authentic Armenian food. And I thought this was a really interesting discussion in the book, pretty explicitly supported by the fact that the whitewashed Armenian food sucked really bad and no one liked it. So that was pretty like, yeah, no. That's not how we do things. Despite supporting the like traditional authentic Armenian food as being like better, it still pushed back against the idea that that meant nothing could ever change ever. So like Nazli's parents were initially unwilling to let her help them modernize in any way, but kind of spoilers, by the end of the book, they found a compromise that modernized the brand without affecting the quality of the food, and that was really nice and wholesome and a good balance between like tradition and, you know, progress. Overall, this was like a pretty quick read. It's pretty short, not even 300 pages, and so it was just kind of fine. It wasn't bad. I don't regret reading it. It just didn't hit the way I wanted it to. Up next was The Neighbor Favor by Kristina Forrest, and this was a 3.5 Virgin on 4 stars. Our main character Lily starts emailing with the author of her favorite book, only for him to ghost her unexpectedly, and then months later she's looking for a date to her sister's wedding, and she enlists her charming new neighbor to be her date. But unbeknownst to her, the charming neighbor, Nick, is actually the author that she was corresponding with. And when he realizes that she's the one he was emailing, he is like, this is too complicated already. I cannot be her date. We can't be in a relationship. But he does agree very gallantly to help her find someone else to be the date to the wedding. In this, Lily is an editor for a nonfiction imprint, and she really wants to be in like children's publishing. So there's a lot of the elements set in the publishing world with her work and her trying to like move up in the ranks and kind of move to different places. And then both characters are Black, so they have this really interesting discussion about Nick's book where he features Black characters in a high fantasy setting and about how alienating the fantasy genre can be for people of color because it is a very like white genre, and I really appreciated that. I thought that was really interesting. Way they talked about that. I did get a little bit frustrated with Nick when he wouldn't confess to Lily that he was the author. But like I did understand where he was coming from, but I was just like, come on, man, like just tell her. I can see how this is going to go badly. It was a bit of a struggle dealing with him with that. I also felt like there were a few parts in this book where the characters like literally chased each other a lot. So there's like a part where she kind of is like, you know, I like you, whatever, and he's like, me too. Wait, no, I can't be with you. And then she like chases him down and is like, wait, be my date. And he's like, no, I can't do that. And then he's like in a taxi and she like chases him out of the building into the taxi and is like, well, help me find a date, and like follows him. And I'm like, stop chasing him. He's already said no, like to 2 different things. Leave the man alone. And it worked out okay, and he did like a similar thing to her. So maybe they're just meant for each other, but I just thought this was a lot of like, kind of like pushing boundaries a little bit when someone has said no to you and just keep like chasing him down. I didn't love that. But despite those relatively small gripes, I did really enjoy the chemistry between the characters, and I especially liked the first chunk of the book, which was like the transcript of the emails that they were sending to each other before they knew who they were. And the author did a really good job of like building the relationship between them before they even met. So I thought that was really good. The chemistry was great. There's a few little nitpicks that saved it from being like a really excellent book for me. The final book that I'm talking about in this video is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, and this was 4 stars for me. So this follows Justin and Emma, who both have a curse where their partners immediately find their soulmates after they break up with Justin or Emma. And so they find each other online and decide to date so that their curses cancel each other out and the next person they date will be their soulmate. This is a very lovely dual point of view romance, and it was so sweet and so emotional. And despite the cutesy cover, I would not say this is a rom-com at all. It's much more like emotionally complex and vulnerable. The characters were really deep and they dealt with a lot of super realistic issues. And this is really a book for the avoidant girlies out there because Emma has built herself a little fortress and is like, nothing is wrong. Nothing can hurt me if I keep running. But Emma and her best friend Maddie are traveling nurses, and so then they travel to Minnesota so that Emma can date Justin just for the summer. And they rent like this cute little cottage on Lake Minnetonka. And I'm not gonna lie, them having to drive this super rickety little like boat to their cottage across the lake all the time was the most stressful part of the book for me. Like, I mean, I was invested in the relationship, but every time they got on that stupid little boat to get to their cottage or from the cottage to the mainland, I was like, they're gonna drown, they're gonna break the boat. It was very stressful. I would not want to be in that situation. But anyways, moving on. Justin and Emma agreed to go on 4 dates and have 1 kiss to be initiated by him, and then they'll break up in order to best mimic their past relationships and have success of finding their soulmate afterwards. And then of course the summer fling turns into real feelings. Justin starts to fall for her first, but Emma's feeling it too. She just doesn't want to admit it. The romance in this was like really sweet and tender. Justin really cutely sets up these surveys before and after their first date. It's so cute. It's really giving like if he wanted to, he would. It was so sweet. He sends her like a little formal invitation. I love it. Their communication is also like really good for the most part. And then even though they have like this excellent chemistry and it's so cute and the dates are going so well, they both have these really complicated lives that get in the way of a real relationship. Justin's about to become the guardian for his 3 younger siblings, and Emma has these abandonment issues stemming from her relationship with her mom and her time in foster care. And I thought the way that these things affected the relationship was realistic, and the resolution to get to the happily ever after was really something they had to fight for, and it was well deserved by the end. There was no like easy shortcuts or loophole. Like they had to put in the work, become better people in order to have their happily ever after. Even though I just talked about all those heavy issues they had to deal with, the book never felt bogged down with them. The banter between the characters was great. There was like the perfect amount of tension and just enough humor to like balance out those really tough topics. So I thought it was a really good level of humor, emotion, and no like I'm depressed about this romance. I also really loved Maddie. She was such a good friend to Emma, and it was really refreshing to see such a deep and complex female friendship in a romance book. And Maddie just sees Emma so clearly, and she loves her so fiercely, and she's so like honest and protective of her. Honestly, if this had been like it turns out Maddie and Emma are soulmates, I would have been fine with that too. Apparently this book takes place in the same universe as 2 of the other Abby Jimenez books, but I read it as a standalone and that was fine. I think I've read one of the other books, but I don't remember how it all ties in together. So it was basically like I'd read neither of them. But overall, it was just really excellent. It was deep, it was emotional, it was lovely, it gave me butterflies in my tummy, and I could not recommend it enough. It's especially great, I think, if you like Emily Henry's style of romances, where it's not just like cute fluffy times all the time, then you would really like this book. So those were the 5 romance books that I read for Valentine's Day, and let me know what good or bad, ranting can be kind of fun, romances you've read recently down in the comments. I'd love to hear them. I'm always looking for new romances, hopefully good ones. And thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you next time. Now go read a book and fall in love. Abby Jimenez is, that's an interesting one. Yeah, Parsnip, did you like this one too? Them having to drive this like work that shoulder, girl.